False confidence will always lead to your nuts being frozen solid no matter what the situation is. It looks like you can see my nipples, like through the, should I change or? It. Let's do it. Let's do it. What's up, everybody? 5 backpacking gear mistakes that only stupid people make. If that title offends you, then I'm sorry. Also, you must be new here because I do these titles all the time. And so you obviously aren't subscribed yet, so please subscribe. There's a cat right over there, and I kind of want to go pet it, but I can't because we got to focus on the matter at hand here. Backpacking gear mistakes. So we're gonna go through a few of these. Backpacking gear mistake number 1 is bad footwear. Very unoriginal, but very important mistake that people make. Very obvious, and I'm sure a lot of you have made this mistake when you first started backpacking. Or maybe you made this mistake even though you had a bunch of experience because you're a fucking dumbass. Either way, it's a very common mistake and a bad one. Let's give some examples of bad footwear mistakes that people make when they're backpacking. The most obvious one I've talked about before, one every single other backpacking channel you subscribe to has talked about multiple times, your choice of footwear. Boots are a big no-no with exceptions, okay? Trail runners, in my opinion, are absolutely 100% the way to go if you're hiking, during the summer, the fall, the spring, anytime you're not dealing with extremely cold temperatures and you're not dealing with snow, ice, things of that nature. And just to stop the guy who's already typing this comment, obviously, if you're hiking in the winter, I'm not saying if you're hiking in the winter, wear boots, for f***'s sake. The last time I made a video talking about this, people commented that, even though I literally said right before I started talking about trail runners, I was like, if you're in the winter, don't bring trail runners. Like if you're hiking in the middle of the winter, you're probably gonna want some boots. So why is this gear mistake so bad? Bringing improper footwear. Well, the truth is, if you can't walk, how the hell are you supposed to hike? You're not gonna get very far. And if you do get somewhere, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt like shit, and you're never gonna ever hike again, and then you're gonna unsubscribe to my channel because you don't care about hiking anymore. So I have a vested interest in you wearing the correct footwear, trust me. I wish I could just stand here and recommend the #1 best shoe for every single person out there for every single circumstance, but I can't. And anybody who does that is lying to you because they want your money. But I don't. Well, I do, but I don't like to make it that obvious. By the way, you should check out my Patreon. You wanna go for something relatively lightweight, and the reason is because less weight on your feet. It's gonna be less tiring as you're huffing it up and down those mountains, as the kids like to say. I don't think any kid has ever said that, actually. You wanna go for something, and this might rustle some jimmies, but something not waterproof. And again, this is my opinion. I'm sure some folks might disagree. If that's the case, go f yourself. The reason I like non-waterproof shoes, again, for 3-season hiking, is because your feet are gonna get wet, most likely. If you're just out for a day, then I guess you could say this doesn't count, but we're talking about backpacking. I put backpacking in the title of this. Non-waterproof is a good thing in your shoes because if you're out for a long time, chances are your feet are gonna get wet eventually. Like if it's raining, like for sure your feet are gonna get wet eventually if you have to ford a stream or something like that. If your shoes are waterproof, once the inevitable soaking of the shoes happens, they're not gonna dry. They're not gonna dry at all, or they will, I guess, but it'll take way too long. Non-waterproof shoes, on the other hand, they might get wet a little bit easier, sure, but even though they got wet easier, they're gonna dry real quick, and having dry shoes is very important when you're backpacking because wet shoes, you know how the saying goes, wet shoes will f your feet up. Backpacking gear mistake number 2 is having false confidence in your backpacking gear. Don't do that. And this is a tough one because false confidence by definition is it's hard to know when you have false confidence in something, right? Because it's false and you have it. Like for instance, I have false confidence most likely that this video is gonna be funny and entertaining and useful. A good example of having false confidence in your gear would be the classic example of warmth, right? So you bought this brand new sleeping bag, you think it's gonna be so warm, and so as a result of that false confidence in your sleeping bag, you take that sucker out onto a hike where it's gonna be 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and maybe it's a 20-degree bag, but you just think this thing is so warm. You think it's gonna be fine, right? No big deal. Trip comes around, you get out there, you end up freezing your nuts off. They freeze and they just fall right. The same could be said about a jacket. Let's say you get this brand new down jacket. It's so warm when you're just wearing it around the house or whatever. You take it out on a trip, gets a little cold. Once again, you put that sucker on, you're still freezing your nuts off. We don't want frozen nuts. We want nice, room temperature. I could literally make this example about any piece of backpacking gear. Trekking poles, for instance. Let's say you buy these brand new trekking poles, you're going up and down your stairs, testing them out. You take them out into the mountains for the first time, you got all this false confidence, you're trying to go up a mountain with them, and then it snaps. It snaps and you break your knee and you can't hike to your campsite, let's say. And as a result, you have to spend the night up way above tree line and it's freezing cold and freezing your nuts off. Once again, false confidence will always lead to your nuts being frozen solid no matter what the situation is. And to the 20% of my audience that's watching this right now that does not have nuts, sorry for leaving you out on this one. Gear mistake number 3, and this is kind of related to the previous point I just made. It's not knowing how to use your gear. An example, let's take one from my life. I've been carrying around this thing called a tick key for years. Like, I bought it on Amazon for like $5 like 3 years ago probably, and I've never used it a single time. But what it's meant to do obviously is to remove ticks. I know there's other ways to do it. I know you can like take a fucking match, like burn your skin, which I'm pretty sure you're actually not supposed to, so don't do that. I read somewhere that this was a more effective and safe way to deal with those little things that are biting you, the ticks. Nobody likes those things. And so I bought it. And like I said, I never used it, not a single time. It occurred to me actually while I was planning this video that as a result of never having to use it, I have absolutely no fucking idea how to use that thing. This seems like a pretty obvious mistake. Like, obviously you should know how to use your gear. And maybe it is obvious for the bigger items, your tent, your backpack. I hope you know how to use a fucking backpack. It's the little items you really want to focus in on. Maybe even the items that are just reserved for, emergency situations or very rare situations. Mistake number 4. This one is being stubborn about your gear. And to give an example of this, I'm gonna throw one of my best friends named Dan directly under the bus for thousands of people to see, because that's just the kind of guy I am, right? When I was first getting into backpacking, hammocking was my preferred method of sleeping outside, and my friend Dan also had a hammock. And actually he had a hammock before I did, so I'm a hammock poser. Can you guys still see my nipples? Check that out. Now, even though Dan bought the hammock first and probably used the hammock first, he did not discover the wonderful world of insulation first, because I did. And I tried to explain to Dan, hey look, I know you always talk about how cold you are in your hammock. You just bought this warm sleeping bag, but you're still cold. Why could that be? Well, I will tell you why, Dan. This is me talking to Dan. You're Dan right now. Listen to me, Dan. Dan, the reason that you're cold, you wanna know why? It's because you don't have any insulation underneath you. That's right, you may think you're in a hammock, you just get in and you're good to go. No, you need some insulation, you hoe. It's because of the airflow, and you go watch one of Shug's videos, he'll explain it. But I was trying to explain this to my friend Dan, and he just wasn't having it. Not because he didn't realize that what I was saying made sense, but purely because he already bought all of his gear, he already had his setup and the way he envisioned his hammock setup to be, and he didn't want to change that. He didn't want to change that. And so for a long period of time, he refused to use an underquilt or a sleeping pad in his hammock. It took him probably a year, I'd say. I don't actually know, but something like a year before he finally gave in and kind of half-assed admitted that I was right the whole time. And he bought a sleeping pad, and his ass was never cold in that hammock ever again, which is something that we can all appreciate. Smash the like button if you appreciate the fact that Dan's ass no longer was cold after he bought a sleeping pad. What the f is wrong with this video? I guess the main point here is just your gear setup is always gonna be fluid. There's always gonna be improvements you can make. I know there's barriers to like changing your gear. I know money is probably the big one. And so I'm not saying like, you know, if you refuse to spend an extra $1,000 on your gear, it's because you're stubborn. No, it's because you're poor. But no, for real, I get the financial barrier. All I'm trying to say here is you just have to be like open-minded when it comes to gear. Just because you have one specific setup and things seem like they are the way they should be, maybe there's another option out there. You should always have an open mind. I know a lot of you don't struggle with this at all because you always just want new gear because you're obsessed with gear. Just something to keep in mind. This next tip is, I do not remember. Let me look at my notes. Yes. This next tip is, or I guess it's not a tip at all, it's a mistake. This next mistake is not packing your gear correctly. And you might think, how do you not pack your gear correctly? You just put it in the backpack. Let me explain what I mean by not packing your gear correctly. And this is going to depend on your backpack a lot. So if you have like one of those huge Osprey backpacks and like, you know, you got tons of pockets and like tons of capacity, maybe you can kind of get away with just like shoving your gear wherever in your backpack. But if you have an ultralight backpack, you got one of those frameless little suckers there, one of the, you know, you got to pack that thing very, very, what's the word here? Methodically or intentionally, right? So you can't just throw shit in there randomly. Like you gotta have, you know, the structure, you gotta make sure it fills the space. This isn't a video on how to pack an ultralight backpack. I'm just saying a lot of people make this mistake of not packing their gear correctly. Let me give a more common and relatable answer to some of you folks who might be beginners out there. How about where you place certain items based on how much you're going to use them or in what situations you're going to use them, where you place them in your backpack, that is. Let's talk about a raincoat. Let's say you're hiking along, everything's going great, all of a sudden, boom, freaking flash, floods, rainstorm, thunder, lightning. You're like, oh shit, like I need to put my rain jacket on. And so you take off your backpack and you go, oh wait, my raincoat is buried all the way at the bottom of my pack. So here you are rifling through all the unnecessary shit you probably bought because you're a beginner and you don't know what the f you're doing. And finally you get to that raincoat, but it's too late. It's already downpouring. And now not only are you wet, can you hear me? But all of your gear is. Maybe an extreme example, but the point stands, you need to be very deliberate about where you pack certain gear items. I always pack things that can get wet on the outside of my pack. So the rain jacket, it's a rain jacket, it can get wet, right? I want to have it easily accessible. That's why it's on the outside. My tent stakes, they can get wet. I don't need those accessible at all, but they're f***ing tents. Like, I don't care, get them wet. Just dunk them in a river. What the f*** am I talking about? Some of these things you're just gonna have to learn as you backpack more. Like for instance, I never realized I needed to keep my toilet paper on the outside of my pack until I shit my pants because I was trying to find it inside of my pack. And that never happened, but just imagine that scenario. I'm sure it's happened to somebody. Comment if you shit your pants because you didn't pack your toilet paper in the right place. Let me tell you guys about my Patreon. If you're the kind of person who watches a lot of these videos or all my videos and you watch them all the way to the end and you're already subscribed and you hit the bell and you hit the like button, maybe you hit the dislike on a couple of them, but for the most part, you hit the like button, you're the person I'm talking to. Let me just pick my nose while I make this pitch. Patreon.com/KyleHatesHiking. It's weird asking for money on the internet, I know. It's just a couple bucks a month. It's the best way to support this channel. You'll get a direct line to me, and you'll get to chat with some other folks on there too who appreciate these dumb videos and my dumb podcast as much as you do, you dummy. Please check it out, and thank you for watching. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. Great video, Kyle, great video.